Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Dad and Barry podcast. My name is Mike, as you know, since you listen to this every week and you follow me on Instagram, also known as Dad and Buried. And Pete, you are wearing a very garish, shall we say, shirt. What's on that? I've seen it before. So
You know what it is? It's a button-down shirt. I know you're not familiar with it because it doesn't just have Velcro on it, but it is a button-down shirt. And I decided to get dressed this week, so that was it. I decided.
What's on it? What's the pattern?
I don't know, man. Oh, it's like a pineapple. It's like a summer shirt. It's like pineapples and such shirt. And the like. Yeah. So, yeah.
Did you have a good Memorial Day, the unofficial start of summer?
I had a wonderful Memorial Day. It was absolutely amazing. Yes, it was. We marked the occasion, the auspicious occasion, by watching Big Time Rush all day, which is a Disney channel.
Big Time Rush.
Yeah, that's right. That's because that's all my kids will watch these days, and that's all we do.
Is that because your tween influences the family?
That's correct. And then I just sit in the corner, just kind of rocking back and forth, kind of picking out my eyebrows and just.
And this is it shows about like a band or something? Yes, it's a band. It's one of the worst shows ever created, I'm pretty sure. Yes. It sounds like it. I don't think I've seen it.
It is actually. Yeah, it's horrible.
Speaking of one of the worst shows ever created, the Dad and Buried podcast.
Yeah, boy.
And this week we are talking about what we want for our kids, which I think, as Pete and I have discussed before, has changed a lot over the past few decades and generations, I would say, based on, what the future may or may not hold for society in general.
Mm-hmm.
A lot more streaming, I'll tell you that much. A lot more streaming than my parents ever expected.
You know what? You called it when you were about 8, I think I remember you saying. There's going to be some sort of video on demand service, and your parents looked at you and go, honestly, Mike, really not now. Just shut up.
Seriously. That's what they did with all of my opinions. When this is why I have a podcast, because I need to get them out.
There you go.
So we'll be talking about that this week, episode number 67. I thought for a second it was episode 69. And then I realized, no, that's not for a couple of weeks. And then I realized, why didn't we save the sex talk episode for number 69? Because that's inappropriate. That's why, Pete.
There we go.
Right?
Yeah. We'll do that for the internet, the inappropriate internet surfing episode that will be coming up.
So as always, if you want to hear the other 66 episodes, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and pretty much there's like 30 different platforms for podcasts this day and age. You can watch us on YouTube and comment individually there. If you watch last week's YouTube, you get to see half of Mom&Buried's face and half of mine. She made her debut, and we didn't do a very good job of blocking, as they say in the biz, and getting ourselves in the frame. But we do want to thank everybody who has subscribed and who's left us some positive comments. I know Mom&Buried got some feedback. She's going to come on a little later in the show and let us know what people said to her on the down low that they didn't want to necessarily put in public.
Yeah, exactly.
About her appearance and about that whole dynamic.
Behind a mask at the supermarket, behind the mask, just like while reaching. Oh, by the way, nice appearance
on the Dad and Buried podcast.
Yeah.
So as always, we'd love if you could, if you haven't subscribed, do subscribe and spread the word and give us a review on Apple Podcasts. If you want, you can throw us some money on Patreon or even Anchor to help us continue with this. I'm going to rattle off the names of the people who have been supporting us monetarily for months now. Ryan Miller, MS Babayan, Check Your Kids at the Door, Chris Coleman, M. Cedeno 1980, Mallory McKenzie, Miriam, Tina Davis, Lindsay Woodruff, Andrea Sandoval, Barbara Geiger, Bill D'Amica, Dana Bosday, Jacques Govar, Morning Glow, Cotton Farmer AZ, Wes Clark, Jennifer Wynn, Julie McCarthy, Paula Polsky, Mary Williams, and Julie Burton. I should make that into like a rap or like the McDonald's song. What's the McDonald's song? 2 patties and a sesame seed bun. Is that how it goes?
Something like that.
The Big Mac song. You don't know it? You don't
know I do. I do, but I don't have it off the top of my head. So
there's a rhythm to it, in that once you would know it, and so would I. I just can't come up with it.
That's
right. Because I have Baby Shark stuck in my head.
That's probably why. Also, you also don't have any rhythm, so that's those two things working together. Yeah.
Racist. Racist.
As you know, I am very.
You're wearing pineapples in your shirt, so I think everybody knows. If anybody here is racist,
listen,
it's that guy.
There we go. Yep.
So we will be back in a minute to talk about what you guys want from your kids, what Pete and I want from our kids.
And what
And
I want from Mike's kids,
yeah,
which
and what I
is
want from your
largely money related. Yeah, it's largely money. Yeah.
I want the same thing for my kids. So, good luck with that, and we'll get into it after this. So we got a serious topic this week, because we've been thinking it's Memorial Day. We're all quarantined. Everybody's kind of, we got
We've had a lot of things. We've had a lot of time to think these last 3 months.
We have. And
like, what have I done?
I've been thinking about is my children's lack of future. Partially because the Earth is in a precarious position for several reasons. I know that's what you wanted to talk about, climate change, right, Pete?
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about it all in one episode, sort of our state of society, income inequality. Yeah, exactly. A lot of, real conspiracies, like what the ancient aliens have really taught us.
I've never seen a single episode of that show. I've only seen the memes.
It's wonderful. The memes.
It's not a comedy?
No, it's not, but it is absolutely
hilarious.
Insane. Yeah, insanely hilarious. But it's actually not that funny. Yeah, look, I thought I kind of suggested this topic because I was thinking, we've been doing schooling now at home. By the way, anyone who's been doing schooling at home and is working as well and has, like, those are the real heroes. Like, how do you? I mean, it is so hard to do this. And yes, I appreciate teachers, but also, we have a lot of teachers at home that are not doing any Zoom stuff or on call.
Oh, really?
So they're just kind of like emailing things out and being like, hey, you guys should really learn this today. And I'm like, hey, thanks.
What do you think those teachers are doing? Like, they're like playing Madden?
Yeah, just really just pissing off, not doing anything. Just sort of feet up, lounging. So my thought was, what is the end game here? When we were growing up, certainly, I think most of us for the last, our parents were raised this way and their parents were raised them that way, is, a lot of it coming from immigration, coming from different countries around the world. I want to have a better life. I want my kids to do better than I am.
Right.
And I'm thinking here, like, what is it that I want for my kids? Because when they come out of all of this, do I want them to afford a home because they can't afford homes anymore? Do I want them to go to a good school and have crippling debt? I don't know what the metric is anymore for kind of what we would deem to have a quote unquote launch a successful kid out into the world, and thought it was worth kind of digging into.
Well, it's funny because I asked this question on my Instagram stories, as I do, and I'm supposed to also ask it on the Facebook page or the Facebook group. And I always forget to do that. I apologize to Sarge, who said he prefers it there. You know what, Sarge?
I take it back.
Into consideration. But most of the answers I got, and I think maybe reflective of the fact that there isn't that path that previous generations grew up with where, their parents maybe got home from the war or sacrificed a lot to survive the Depression. And then it was like, all right, here's what you need to do. Get this kind of job or go to college, get this kind of job, 2 kids, picket fence, all that stuff. Nowadays, it's more like drop out of high school and start coding, right? And like build an app. And even that was like 15 years ago. It's not even like now anymore. Now It's like, you're lucky if the Earth is still here in 30 years.
Yeah.
So why are we even planning a future? But most of the responses that I got weren't that practical thing about like, I want my kid to have a house. It was more intangibles. Like, I want my kid to be happy. I want my kid to be kind. I want my kid to be decent. Right. Which is a big thing. I think that also reflects the times a little bit because a lot of people who are privileged or 1% or have the money and stuff seem to be some of the worst people in some cases.
Mike, I can hear you, right? Okay.
You are wearing a pineapple shirt.
You know what I'm saying? I'm sitting right here. I'm literally, yeah.
So obviously this is a little bit of a heavier topic than normal, but don't worry. We'll bring it down to our level.
Yeah.
Like we usually do.
We're going to get some fart jokes out of this bad boy.
You know what? I don't do scatological stuff and the fart jokes. Although I have a couple of, I'm saving a potty training story.
Okay. Can't wait.
A potty training story, right? What I want that's the main thing I want from my kids, to wipe their own asses.
There you go.
Anyway, so a couple of comments we got from the top. O.Hey.Ah said, I had to punish my daughter last night, and she said she didn't think I loved her anymore. I told her I just don't want her to grow up to be a shithead. That's love. But honestly, I want my kids to be kind and respectful to others, self-sufficient, have some common sense, not feel entitled, and having a little money wouldn't hurt. But see, like none of that is like a good job, stability, a house. It's very much like I want my kids to not be jerks and to at least find some kind of satisfaction.
Right. And I think this is really important because I think that's a huge shift that's only happened recently. Like if when I think, I mean, I think about my parents, you know, we would only talk about, you're going to go to the right school, you're going to go to this child. Like, if you can't go to the school, you can't go. Finance. Remember talking about how much people wanted to get into finance? Some of the worst people I know in the world work in finance. Like that I know of.
Everyone knows. Some of the worst people in the world are in finance. Most of them, maybe.
Yeah, and I think, the ones that I really actually I do like, but that also work in finance, I know that, you know, they do it for very specific reasons, which are like they need to have 3 houses, and that's it.
Yeah.
Like there's no other. Get
rich, yeah.
But the concept of this sort of more holistic, respectful, kind of more self-aware, more
do you think it's like more enlightened? It's like we're the next generation and we now understand more that it's more important to be like well-rounded, to be a good person, than it is to attain money? Or do you think it's because the avenues for that other stuff are more closed and it's not as easy, so we have to emphasize like plan B, which is easier to attain? Don't get caught up in this shit that you're probably not going to get. Instead, focus on self-contentment and being a good person, because odds are you're not going to be rich anymore.
Yeah, well, that's right. You know, and I think that really that's well put. And I think it's really more, you know, our jobs now are to make sure that our kids kind of can navigate this. There are no roads, is my point. Like there's no, you know, if you think about it, remember the gold watch? Like you'd get a gold watch. Like the concept of your kid, explain to your kids the concept of what it means to get a gold watch, because you worked where for how long? For 45 years, you worked for the same company.
For retirement. Yeah.
I'm talking about just, this concept of like what once existed for many, you know, people never even.
It's funny. So
their job for their entire life.
You brought to mind 2 things. One is the gold watch that Christopher Walken's character has up his ass in the story he tells in Pulp Fiction.
There we go. There's that catalog.
And the other is Dennis Hopper's character in the movie Speed enacts a terroristic rampage on Keanu Reeves, partially because he was fired, forced into retirement by the LAPD, and got a gold watch, and he did not appreciate it. So. Right. This is very pertinent to this conversation. That's a Pulp Fiction reference and a Speed reference.
You, once again, have nailed it and really brought this sort of quite nuanced topic into sort of pop culture mushiness, I want to say.
Pop quiz hot shot.
And we also got someone's butt in there, and we're talking about the ass, so that was good.
Pop quiz hot shot. Your kids aren't guaranteed any of the stability or success that previous generations are. What do you do? What do you do? I get it?
Make sure that they're enlightened and have a social media account.
You know what? I sense the shade and I don't appreciate it. So Little Charmer 80, a very prolific commenter, says, what do I want for my kids? She says, well, the main thing, I guess, this is funny because she kind of equivocates the whole time. The main thing, I guess, is that they're happy in what they do. I don't want them to have regrets about things they wish they'd had the guts to do. You never regret things you do. You only regret the things you don't do. Like go abroad junior year in college, like me. I really regret it. And not getting contact lenses earlier enough in my life, Pete. She said, and I don't want them to feel disappointed in their life choices. Of course, I want them to be financially secure and have good jobs, etc. But I worry a lot about their generation and mental health. So them being happy is more important ultimately. Is that attainable? We're going to get into that. I always grew up with the rigid expectations of society weighing heavily on my shoulders and didn't really realize there was an alternative to school, college, job, buy a house, marriage, kids. I want them to travel, see the world, enjoy themselves, and not get ground down into that 9-to-5 soul-crushing routine too soon, if ever, right? But that was the roadmap.
Yeah, there we go.
Partially that roadmap doesn't exist, and also we don't necessarily want our kids to be on that grind, right?
Yeah, and it changes things, right? So I went to, private school. I never went to public school, obviously. I mean, that's how I entered the 1% immediately.
That's where you got your shirt.
That I literally was was handed to me. But my kids go to public school, and I actually find it so. There's parts that I absolutely love about, and parts I don't like that much. But I think it's so much better for them.
The diversity
and just being able to navigate, just being a better.
Oh, is it a sailing school?
It is. It's a sailing school. I mean, of course, because Buffy and I.
Buffy is the name you went to?
Yes, because that's
like the rich woman, the rich woman,
exactly,
privileged, waspy woman.
Yep.
Buffy. Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Does she kill vampires too? Does she kill vampires, Pete?
Not that I know of. Just regular people.
Yeah.
Not
her servants.
Yes.
We watched a movie last night called Ready or Not on HBO, which is about.
I watched that last night too.
No, you didn't.
I did. When she gets married and has to.
She marries into a 1% family.
Yes.
And slowly, but incidentally, throughout the movie, accidentally a bunch of their servants get killed and no one cares. Like one by one, the servants are getting knocked off. You're like, who cares? That's what Buffy does. Not Buffy from the TV show, Buffy from real life, who murders illegal immigrants and her servants because she has no respect for human life. She just wants money and power. Anyway, Millennial Mama 90 said, my greatest fear as a parent is that my children will have the ability to be extraordinary, but because I am only ordinary, they won't have the tools to live up to their potential. Now that is rough stuff. She's like, because they're extra special, but my baggage essentially as a bad parent and a mediocre person is going to bring them down and stop them from reaching their true potential. She says, so the one thing that I hope for my children is that they don't use me as a guideline for success and settle there, and they use their full potential to be as great as their skills, smarts, talents allow them to be. So she wants her kids to have more success than her, mostly because she considered herself a trash person. And I follow her online, and I know she's not a trash person. She's being very hard on herself. But every parent kind of worries that they're blowing it and that they're somehow going to limit their kids. The thing is with this stuff, and we've said this before, and I say this all the time, we're not going to know if our kids achieve the things we want for them for like 30 years. We don't know how they're going to, whether we're talking about like the success metric based on money or whatever. It won't be till they're like 40 till we know if they've made it. And we certainly won't know if they're like well-adjusted or good people until they're out of their 20s. And
at what point can we expect them to buy us stuff? You know what I mean? Like not just like kind of trinkets and stuff. I'm talking like cars, boats, and houses. Mainly boats though, and cars. So
the sailing school, you don't want to put that to waste.
No, Buffy and I will never do that. But first of all, Millennial Mama 90, you're being way too. I mean, that is. But also, that's the kind of drive. I mean, just the nature of that, your desire to want your kids to be better. Yeah. That's exactly what they're going to be great no matter what, because you have that going on in the back of your mind the whole time. So, and that's great.
Here's an interesting aspect of that. I think earlier generations would, especially like Depression, post-Depression, would sacrifice a lot. They would sacrifice basically their own lives in order to provide for their kids, especially immigrants are coming over and stuff. Nowadays, it's even sacrificing and like having 3 jobs and doing all that stuff doesn't guarantee anything. It's kind of like there's these grid lines you kind of have to be on, and that's why people are the disparity in wealth and stuff and the opportunity and the privilege is so skewed that the American dream, it's essentially kind of what we're talking about, is much less attainable. It's limited to a much smaller window of people just by virtue of the circumstances they're born into, whereas that isn't what it used to be 80 years ago. At least in theory.
Yes and no. And I here's why. Because I also believe that we are now living in an age where technology has democratized everything. For example, what do I want? The house, the kids, like, what house do I want for my kids? Like, do I really, do I want a house in the suburb or do I want a house in the city or, whatever? Like, the point is
you want a pied-à-terre in Paris?
There's so much that we now have as a society in general. I think that it really comes down to who you are as a person and how you want to navigate that. I think it's, We're living in new times, my friend, in terms of how kids are going to be raised.
I think that's another challenge I want to bring up in a minute. But first, I want to some people being a comedy podcast most of the time. Pete,
is it? It's really family. Kids.
sent in some tongue-in-cheek responses. Kristen 2323 said she would like her children to be happy, kind, and have enough money to put me in an awesome nursing home. Right? That's the key part of it, right? I don't care how big their house is, but I want to be taken care of at some point, some way or another. Janisher 312 says I would really just like him to have a childhood that he doesn't have to spend his 20s recovering from. Somebody else said that they want their kids to have less therapy than they need. So a dad said, I want my kids to have less therapy than I need, right, from my childhood, which is the same kind of thing. You want your kids just to be well adjusted and to not have you to bitch about to the therapist, which is pretty much going to happen regardless, no matter what you do.
I mean, you can't escape that. Yeah.
Christy Witt says she wants her kids to move out, which I can totally agree with that. KSU Julie, one of our patrons and loyal followers, says she wants her kids to not get married at 22. She said, "Oh, I'll speak up. I'll never forever hold my peace if they're 22 and they want to get married." Which, you know what? The heart wants what it wants, right? True love exists. There are plenty of people who got married at 22 and have forged successful partnerships. Wouldn't you say, Pete?
But what you're forgetting, though, Mike, is that KSU Julie didn't attend those weddings.
That's true.
So
she went to her wedding.
That's correct. If she had been at those weddings, they just wouldn't. They'd be over.
Rue_Pow says, I want my daughters to move with the confidence of mediocre white men. Which is a good goal, right?
Look at that.
To glide through life without having to try too hard and to have some privileges just because they're white. She wants her daughters to be large adult sons like Eric Trump. Right? The large adult son phenomenon, where just some bumbling clown because of who his dad is. But the confidence that they have, they're entitled and they think they're right about everything and they think they're cool and they look like Eric Trump.
He really is a specimen, isn't he? Is he the one that shot like Harambe or something like that? Like, didn't one of them
No, I think that was Don Jr.
Yeah.
Harambe. I don't think it was Harambe, though.
I'm pretty sure it was. Pretty sure it was a conspiracy. Just look at it.
Cammy Jean 2 says, I want my kids to continue using words like clicker for remote and push mower for lawnmower because it's small victories that get me through the day. So she's looking short term, and I can appreciate that because you do need to get through the day, especially quarantine right now. You take any little smile you can get. Jenny Mac 37 says she wants them to be happy, not on drugs. I don't know if those two things compute. Financially independent enough to not ask me for money. That would be nice.
Yeah.
Like, even if they can't put me in a nursing home, at least don't drain my finances, right?
Right. And if you are on drugs, can it just grow from the ground, or do you have to go and buy it from someone? That's I think the way to really think about it. You know what I mean?
You got to keep that money in your pocket and do this organically, right? But even that landscape is changing. You can make a mint if you work in CBD and legal marijuana and that stuff. That can be a path.
Yeah, there you go. So actually amend that. Do drugs, get on the internet, and sell whatever you can.
Get financially independent through the drugs.
There you go.
And not in like a New Jack City, Nino Brown kind of way. Chef Daddy Master says he wants his kids to have enough sarcasm to keep up with the family. Be careful what you wish for. My 9-year-old can do that, and it is not a lot of fun. The Hangry Dad says, I want them to get to 18 with all of their limbs and fingers, but if we lose a toe, so be it.
Just not the big one. That really stabilizes.
That
that really stabilizes you.
And Coffee is my mommy juice says she hasn't thought that far yet. She's just trying to survive adulthood. So she's trying to get herself through. And I agree with that, where like you can have kind of big plans and maybe theoretically map out what you want for your kids. But when you're in the shit, the day to day, it's not super easy to stick to blueprints, you know?
Yeah, I mean, this is another part of it, which is I feel, not very well prepared for, guiding anybody because we're just trying to figure it out. I'm trying to figure it out myself. And so I guess you fall back on just trying to raise people that are not miserable.
Idiots or jerks.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
So we did, again, like I said, a lot of it is intangible stuff, but there was a handful of people who talked about the need or the desire for kids to have good careers and good income, right? So PG08302 says, this is a good twist. Not necessarily a lot of money, but a good financial education, right? So knowing how to, make your money go far and understand that kind of stuff. And that's a good idea. And a trade, she mentions, which those kinds of things fell out of favor. Like the technical school in like my town, like the trade school was like, oh, if you couldn't hack real high school, you went to learn how to be like a plumber or an electrician. But those things.
Who's laughing now?
Those are the essential workers.
Well, not just that, but that's kind of what my point is I think that those, here's an example. You have someone who's graduating from marketing. You can hire someone who's graduated from, let's say, an Ivy League school, right? Mm-hmm. Who's that's their accomplishment, who's gone
got degrees.
They've gotten a degree from an Ivy League school. Or you can hire someone who went to whatever college, but has 40,000 subscribers or followers on multiple platforms. My point is what is the metric now? Like, who do you go with? Like, the point is there are other indicators. It used to be that there was an indicator. One of the number one indicators was where you went to school, how you did
this. Having a college degree.
Having a college degree. Yeah. And now having a college degree means lamenting how badly you're in debt, right? And then the next thing is if you can have any practical skills, a la like a trade of some kind. Mm-hmm. Even I would even say that, like, argue that being able to do manage yourself socially, like online,
Stop kissing my ass.
It's a bit of a trade. It's a bit of a skill, and that's it. And it's different from just having taken tested well or been fortunate enough to go to good schools. I think
have the right network of people.
Exactly, and I think that's really kind of starting to change, and it's interesting how.
I wish I were growing up now, because I have zero practical skills and no network, right? So I like this idea of, hey, there's a whole new world out there. You don't need these things. Although we haven't quite gotten there yet. The revolution is coming where things are going to topple. Kings will topple. The guillotine, I say guillotine, will come out. I like guillotine, but I don't know about...
Look, I don't know. I don't think it's going to be quite that severe. But what I do think is that the path, right? The path that we certainly grew up with, just doesn't exist anymore, right?
It's got a lot of different branches.
Well, there we go. That weren't around. But someone who was divorced, you're like, wait, I know that one person in our town that was divorced or whatever. It's like now there's you have
divorced.
Exactly. And the whole thing is, it's like, how do you prepare your kid for the right?
So you're right. So it used to be there were like 5 paths, and 3.5 of them were like, if you do this right, you're gonna be happy. You're gonna be successful. You're gonna get what you need. Now there are 100 paths, and maybe none of them.
And who knows? Exactly.
You're not gonna be happy. You're not gonna be successful in any of those.
Yeah. So honestly, just brush your teeth and go to bed.
Yeah.
Just brush your teeth and go to bed.
So, SPEDRSON says he wants his kids to have a strong character with a good work ethic in whatever they choose to do. Money, meh. So good work ethic is huge, right? So that's applicable no matter what you do. If you are the kind of person who just wants to get the job done, isn't afraid of a little hard work, a little elbow grease, that's huge. I wrote a blog post once about how my parents failed me by giving me too much because it reduced my work ethic, it was partially tongue in cheek. I was not rich by any means. But I do think that is what happens to large adult sons. Their parents or their dad give them everything they need. They never have to work for anything. And then they not only are they lazy and not good at things, they're entitled and privileged and feel like they deserve all these things, right? So the work ethic, I think, is huge. So I put a little thing in here that my brother once said jokingly to me that he didn't think my parents emphasized the need for money enough. And I think this is a double-edged sword, because my parents emphasized work ethic, and you do your best. Like, you don't want your kid to be like, all I want is money. Money is the key indicator of success. Even if it was in the 80s or whatever, the Reagan's America, that kind of thing. Those aren't necessarily kind of values. You don't want to be like Gordon Gekko to your kids, right? You want them to live the fairy tale that, like, just, you have a job you love, you'll never work another day in your life, and you need to find happiness within yourself. And then at the same time, money is pretty important. Right. So my brother made a joke about how, like, if my parents were like do this, do that, which in fact they were. My dad used to tell me to like study Chinese and take computer classes because he saw the future coming.
Right. Which
and
you
I was
did
like,
neither
no,
of those things.
no.
And
I wrote the
here we go.
stickball current, something I printed about my brother's stickball league when I was a little kid.
Okay.
That you look where I am now, 150,000 followers on Instagram. So who's laughing now, Dad? Send me that rent check, my man.
Still dad. Yeah, still dad.
But I mean, I do think that is the challenge because you want your kids to be self-sufficient and have money to not have to want from other people, but you don't want them to focus all of their happiness on the need for money and those things, or else they'll be warped individuals.
Yeah, and I
presidents.
think exactly. I mean, really, that's probably the best example of like where we've come, right? Like,
yeah,
here is an absolute perfect example of a human being who has strived literally just for those things that were laid out. You go to this school, then you go to this school,
and was given a head start by his dad in all of those areas.
Absolutely. And we are at the apex of this kind of narcissistic, like, and I don't know, and you know, for me, I'm a little torn because I also feel that, quite honestly, social media and posting about yourself and taking pictures of yourself every 5 minutes and, you know, focusing on that is also not, you know, Mike. Well, no, don't worry, because you just make memes. And I think,
how dare you?
Yeah, that's a much, much healthier skill. I just think that it's hard to balance the stuff of trying to get your kids to want to do, you know, be happy, be sufficient, self-sufficient, fulfilled, while at the same time you have all this like outside or brand new pressure. I shouldn't even say outside, brand, like, you know, new platforms coming up every day that emphasize like, you know, how do you look? What do you, where are you right now? And what do you look like? And all of this stuff is kind of happening, right?
It's all happening
as we are trying to figure out, was the path of good school, good job, you know,
was it
like
bullshit?
Love and so on and so forth, maybe a house to live in somehow, you know, is that all the right thing? Or what are we looking at now? Are we all just going to be like renting pods, you know, in 6 months anyway? And does it really matter that we go to any school whatsoever other than just learn stuff online? I mean, no joke, dude. No joke.
Learn everything, yeah.
I've literally looked up my kid 5 times already, like today, looked up my kid's exact math curriculum on
that's
YouTube.
Not learning.
Well, but my point is it's all changing. Like there was a teacher, a great teacher online on YouTube. I encourage everyone to do the same thing. I'm sure you're already doing it, but just explained the whole thing phenomenally well. Here now I know how to do it, and you know how to solve a mixed number or whatever the problem was.
A mixed number, a mixed fraction.
Mixed fraction, yeah. I call them numbers. So anyway, the point is it's fascinating now because it's what is important, and how do we pass that on, and what do we need to do now at this point? Do we stick to the game plan, or do we just focus on making sure that they?
But I think it's also a function of where we're at, right? Of the type of people we are, right? So whereas older generation, I think we can all agree, were more likely to be kind of like hard asses and more disciplined on kids. And now it's a little bit more like buddy. We spend more time with our kids, the interaction, right? So Jeff the dog says, I want my daughter to have stability and security. I want her to understand how to manage her money and make smart financial decisions, which is big. Everybody understands that like debt and all that stuff is a big deal, so they want their kids to have some know-how with that. He said, I like her to be kind and caring and emotionally intelligent. Beyond that, she can do what makes her happy. Marry a man or a woman or both, or neither. Be a stripper or an engineer or an artist or all of the above. Right now, she'd like to be a ballerina astronaut, and I fully support that. Now, if I had told my dad when I was like 12 that I wanted to be a ballerina astronaut, he would not have fully supported it. He wouldn't have been an asshole, but he would have been like, yeah, that's not practical. You know, you need to know how to take care of yourself. But I think, and look, he might have been like, sure, you know, the wishy-washy stuff that we all pretend to do. I just want you to be happy. But I do think that's more of a real thing now, is where we are much more focused on fulfillment as like a human being that doesn't revolve around success and money and stuff. So the next big section of our discussion is about happiness. So a lot of people said they just want their kids to be happy. Jojo Dobias said they want my kids to be comfortable enough to live fully without struggling and to be happy. Buyers.remorse says to not have to have a shitty job they hate like me and to be happy, right? The thing is, you go through it being like, I want to have that job where I'm passionate about it and I never have to work another day in my life. Odds are that job doesn't pay quite enough for you to get the other things you want. So then you maybe have to make some compromises and you get a job or two jobs that you don't love just to have that kind of stability. And then you're not so happy anymore, are you, Pete?
Well, yeah, no, I certainly am not. That's why we are doing this podcast, which is to just vent. Is that's our main focus. But I think also you have the concept of the job and how you perceive these things. Like there's everything that has to do with making money, even if it's something you love, like even if it's painting or whatever, there's going to be really shitty parts to it. And it's about navigating that. I think for me, that's my main focus. If my kids can come out of this whole thing with the ability to handle change in a way that works for them, so they can, because by the way, when they're floating on their floaty pods or whatever they're going to be doing, like in 5 years,
the future all revolve around pods.
Getting the news from Tide on a toaster, it's just by the way, mark my words. So I think that you
need them to have that kind of foundation and the skills they need, that their happiness isn't tied up in external things.
It's not tied up, and that they can be okay with change because it's going to happen a lot.
So Haley Iris said that exact thing, where basically, I want my kids to have the ability to be happy in any situation, even if life sucks. Which I think is a good point, where it's not about tying your happiness to what is necessarily happening. It's about, being comfortable with yourself and being happy and realizing that you don't need to make money to be happy or whatever. But in reality, it's easier to be. Money can't buy you love, but it can buy just about everything else.
Yeah, and also real close. And get real close.
And also the movie Can't Buy Me Love, which I watched last weekend.
Okay.
I think we talked about it last week. You have no idea what I'm talking about. Hold on. So a bunch of other people mentioned the happiness thing, and then a lot of the discussion was around intangibles. And I think that, again, that's partially because the tangibles are harder to attain these days. It's harder to pinpoint a way to get to some of those things. So instead, exactly what you're talking about, we want to equip our kids with the ability to have the personalities or the work ethic or the compassion or whatever to survive without necessarily worrying about some of that materialistic stuff, if need be. Always Smile 007 says common sense and empathy. Colleen.Patton224 says, I want them to have confidence, common sense, and kindness. Oi_Yvette says he wants them to be independent, happy, caring, well-rounded, and self-sufficient, and also to call me a lot. I don't know if they're going to be calling you. Maybe texting if you're lucky.
Just thinking about it.
Thinking about it telepathically.
Yeah.
Tara Nay 1 says, I want them to feel comfortable being their authentic self and to be accepted by me no matter what. Now, being accepted by you is solely up to you as the parent, whether you accept your kid for who they are or not. But to feel comfortable being their authentic self. So basically that's like, don't be pressured by society or peers or whatever to whatever. Yeah. And then that's something that every kid feels, that kind of pressure when they're in high school or whatever. So that's something that you'll have to find out later in life.
I mean, look, here's the thing. Definitely don't succumb to pressure. But if I have to ask you one more time to brush your teeth, you're going to feel all the pressure, but it's going to be at the base of your neck. Right at the base. You do
not accept your kids when they don't brush their teeth. You're intolerant of their life choices.
When it's the fifth time asking, then there's no tolerance anymore. It becomes a complete oligarchy dictatorship. Yeah.
So Jay Batolius and Shala plus 3 said the same thing. They want their kids to be content in who they are and comfortable in their own skin, which is important. Jen Ben 801 says, I want my kids to not settle. I want them to get what they want out of life, whatever that looks like, have dreams and chase them. So that's like, you know what? I want them to want what they want. She's punting on the question. She's just like, whatever they want to have, they can do that. I'm not making that decision for them. Becca For Real says, I want my girls to have enough street smart so they don't get scammed or taken advantage of. She's not jaded and cynical, just cautious and thoughtful. Or no, she wants her kids to not be jaded and cynical, just cautious and thoughtful. Which, I don't know. Jaded and cynical is working out pretty well for me. 150,000 followers. So maybe slow your roll, Becca For Real.
You're a real dick.
So Jan Marie Morris says, I want my kids to not be a porn star or murdered, just be good people. The rest doesn't matter to us. Now,
you know what?
You can be a porn star and still be a good person. And you can also be murdered and still have been a good person. Maybe not be a murderer. That's where I draw the line.
But that Venn diagram is pretty specific, getting murdered. And because if you're in the center of that, life has been tough, man. You've made some tough choices.
So probably the most overwhelming section I got, and so a ton of people said this, Juicy with an I, Mango, RAC016, Tricky _16, Amara 402, E Frerix, Felicia J13. Everybody said, I want my kids to not grow up to be assholes, right? So you just want your kids to be decent, good people that aren't pieces of shit and aren't mean to people for no reason and aren't entitled, right? So Bentini80, who writes a book every aunt, she's just very prolific. And I told her, I'm like, you got to start emailing these things to me because it's harder for me to put them together this way. And then I looked at her comments. I'm like, damn it, I got to transcribe these because these are good. She said, I want my kids to be kind and open-minded. I want them to sit with the kid who was alone in the cafeteria, sit with the kid who doesn't have a lot of friends, who doesn't seem to fit in. We live in a typical vanilla suburb, but I want them to know that families come in all shapes and sizes. Like, what's one of the things we have going for us living in Brooklyn in a city? The diversity that you just encounter and see, whether it's gay people or, you know, different ethnicities and cultural, religious backgrounds. That's one of the best parts about living in a city. Dana Bosday says, I want my kids to be kind and have empathy for others. I want them to live in a country world that tolerates everyone. I don't know, Sweden? I don't know where you, Canada?
Oh, goddamn Swedish.
I don't know where she's from. I want them to understand that if you don't agree with someone's lifestyle, move on. And I want them to learn to clean up after themselves and not be snobs. Those are two very different. Clean up after yourself and not be a snob. Although I guess, again, if you clean up and if you know what it's like to be in the trenches and working for that kind of stuff without being entitled, it's less likely for you to be a snob.
But one trick there is one move is after you spent your lifetime of cleaning up, is to just kind of push back from the table stand and be like, I don't do this anymore, and then walk away.
Yeah, I'm done.
I've already done it. I've already cleaned up enough. That's like a microphone drop. Yeah, exactly. That's a twist.
People still say that?
Do
you still say that when you leave parties, Seacrest out, which is what you used to do all the time? You're a big American Idol guy.
The only time I did that was the one time I got invited to a party because I never got invited back after I did that.
Because you wore the pineapple shirt.
Yeah, that's right.
Like, that guy's not coming back. He went
and I was like, that guy is a chode.
Chode.
Doesn't matter. They're all chodes.
You're a neo maxi zoom dweeby. How about that?
So
mentioned last week we had Mom&Buried on for the first time. And she wanted to come on and give some thoughts about how that went. And when I mentioned tonight's topic to her, she had a couple thoughts on that as well.
Okay.
She's gonna pop over.
Yeah.
So we were talking. Here she comes. We were talking about what we want for our children, and I've told you before. I really want my kids to be really good at the 6 degrees of separation or 6 degrees from Kevin Bacon game. I used to be really good at, but as I've gotten older, I've forgotten. So I'm trying to teach. That's my main thing. I want my kids to have a lot of pop culture knowledge.
Right.
Good. But you're 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon.
So what's nice is you're setting the bar like real low, and then whatever happens from there, it's all gravy.
You know what? You hope for the best, prepare for the worst.
There you go.
Come on, here she comes. She wants to discuss. So we have different backgrounds. I grew up in the New Haven area. The best pizza in the world. She grew up somewhere where there wasn't any good pizza.
That's accurate, actually. I grew up in rural Pennsylvania, mainly. That and like a part of Jersey you wouldn't want to live in, which is most of Jersey.
Okay, starting with Secaucus. Yeah. No,
but for the most part, very rural. Like we could see one other house.
Well, I visited. Like we drove through her town once. Her family doesn't live there anymore, but we were driving somewhere. And she took me on a tour. Rural does not do it justice.
It does not. It's very sticky.
It's like the town in Footloose. You get in trouble if you dance. In this town, they'd never heard of dancing.
There was literally nothing to do. But it was also like, I mean, it was not an affluent town. I mean, it's very blue collar, and I grew up in a family like that.
The path out wasn't quite as clear as for someone like you, Pete, who could move to England and go to prep school.
Yeah. So what was the expectation then, Heather?
I don't think there was. I think my parents, wanted me to be better than that. Like, be better than them, like every single parent does, right?
Mission accomplished. No offense.
Praise. Have a better life than them, not be better than them. But
and then you met Mike, and then that sort of the graph started to go down.
She was on her way up, and then
yeah, mistakes were made, but the actual, because I lived in a blue collar family, we had 5 kids. My dad worked really hard, all his life, and still does. But there were times where we were on food stamps, or the power would go out, and it would just happen, right? And so I just feel like that's a little very different from how
I grew up
knowing
or expecting to go to college, right? Like knowing I had that path in front of me. Look at the camera.
Yeah.
Knowing I had that path in front of me, and it was attainable. My parents were able to pay for it, right? Because I'm privileged. I'm a mediocre white man who's been able to sail through life. And then when I was on my own is when I really started to tumble, because I was too mediocre.
Life really caught up.
It's the very middle of the road, really worked out for it. And no one in my family went to college. A fair amount of people in that area just basically got pregnant in or directly thereafter high school, got married, and did all the things that their family, before them did. And so no, there was no expectation I would go to college. I always thought I would. And, I wouldn't say I was discouraged, but it was made clear to me that that's not really likely. Yeah, that's unattainable.
Did they try to how does that other things? Like they want you to be happy or kind?
I mean, I think they raised me well. They raised me to be kind. I think that some of this stuff, though, when you ask what, I know you even mentioned about your brother thinking that, your parents mentioning that, they
didn't put
enough emphasis on money. But I think in some ways that's inaccurate because, they were preparing for you to go to whatever college you wanted. They wanted you to go to law school. There was an emphasis on that success that tied into it.
Sure, yeah.
You know what I mean? Where my parents just wanted me to.
So imagine their disappointment. It's almost like it's heartbreaking, right? I'm talking about Mike's parents.
I was like, hey.
No, so, well then.
Yeah, my parents are very proud of me.
Well, so how does that translate to your kids, Heather?
I think.
What do you want for your kids? Is it the same? Are you like, oh, well, definitely gonna go to college?
6 degrees of Kevin Bacon.
Well, besides 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. Well, yes. I mean, if we're talking about those sort of items, I'd like, my kids, both boys, to grow up, and pick up their own shit and don't rely on their wife to, clean up after them nonstop. Or I'm sorry, I meant husband. Yeah, you're right. Sorry, spouse, whatever. Basically, just in that way, better than my personal experience.
So you're saying that I don't clean up after myself?
You're a slob a little bit, yeah.
You don't clean up after yourself well enough. I think that's the key.
Clutter and filth are different things. I do not leave food around. I leave clothes around sometimes. They're not soiled. There's just things on tables. He
just found his pants that's been missing for 3 weeks soiled. They're not
hanging soiled. By the You hung them up in a weird place that makes no sense. I don't hang things up. That's how I know it was true. You.
I do know that you don't hang things up.
Anyway.
Regardless, but when we're talking about more realistic things, obviously, yes, I want my kids to be, like my older kid, I think sometimes he struggles with self-esteem and stuff like that. I want him to, them to be confident with who they are and,
But you're not talking about you want them to have a great career or own a home.
Well, that's part of it.
It's hard to pinpoint stuff because the future is kind of like we were saying, there's no blueprint really anymore, and there'll be even less of one in 20, 30 years when they're
So, I mean,
Yes.
that's my question to you specifically is specifically what would you want them? Do you want, like, I'll give you an example. It's like being a lawyer is not something I want any of my kids to be, or in finance. Like, I just don't want that for them because I know people who are in that, and I don't like that.
Well, they're miserable people. They're miserable at their lives.
It's a generalization. Well,
obviously,
it's a generalization, but at the same time, like, it's just not something in my experience that I've had any pleasant experience around either of those two kind of sets. Either the people themselves are great and they really are like they hate their job,
yes.
right? Or the people are the worst people you've ever met, and they absolutely
they're
love
really
their
good
job.
at it. Yeah, they're really
Yeah.
good at it. Yeah.
Right.
And I just neither of those two things is something that I would want for my kids. And I know that was something.
We used to play the life board game when we were kids, and you could choose like 3 careers.
Yeah.
And the ones you wanted were like doctor or lawyer because they gave you the most money. But now I don't know that, like, if I were creating a new version of the life board game, I wouldn't base it on career, right? I would be like, happy, kind, compassionate, 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon.
Right.
Like, these are the things I would choose.
I know, and
Right.
I think this would be the worst selling board game of all time if my math is correct, and it is.
All this, there's a very big focus, I think, on with our generation on kids about being good humans, and you know what I mean, a lot more awareness and stuff like that. So the parents would buy it, the kids wouldn't play it.
No, it would not be fun.
But yeah, I mean, I guess that's so funny. I think it's very interesting. You have like specific things that you're like, I do not want you to be that, which I guess a lot of parents have, but it's usually like, a musician.
Republican. Which is basically what you said, Pete. So,
I would say that, like, I do want them to obviously be happy. When you talk about happy and stuff too, though, money is important. Like, it is.
Sure.
Attainable.
Absolutely, Mike. I've achieved it at least 3 times while
That's what I'm saying, though. It's not.
It was at episode 24. You'll notice that I've achieved ultimate happiness.
Happiness isn't like a state of being. It's not something you can achieve and then you're just happy.
No, happiness is a journey, not a destination, right? Like,
no, that's life. You're talking about the Aerosmith song, "Amazing." It's life's a journey.
No, it's a choice. Happiness is kind of a choice, right? So that's a whole other thing, right? There's that mental thing, but it does help. I do want them to be, to be comfortable in life, right? We've had stress with like money and debts and stuff that I would not want them to have to deal with, right?
What about this astronaut who was basically like, is a Harvard MBA, is a doctor, is a Navy SEAL, and an astronaut. And I think he's like 35. Do you know this guy? This guy's like
he's sick.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. He's made all of us sick, and he's spoiled it. What?
Well, me.
What are you talking about? No one's enjoying his life more than this guy right now, walking around with his arms like this, just held out over his head,
35 years,
fist pumping like this as he walks down the street.
35 years of the grinding to get there.
But he's only 35.
Yeah, no, he's young. He's young.
I mean, either way, right?
He made that person up. It's obvious.
No, he's a real person.
What's his name?
Pepe
Le Pew. Come on.
Actually, Pepe Le Pew might be his name.
So I do want to say, this is my wife, Heather, aka Mom&Buried. She has 90,000 followers on Instagram herself. Her second time on the Dad and Buried podcast. I think because last time went pretty well. Did you get any feedback from people that didn't want me to know what they were saying?
I mean, just the usual. I'm better than you in every way. That sort of thing.
In every way.
And
what about 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon?
Well, I don't know. I hear you're off your game. We'll see.
We'll do that next episode.
I did get some feedback from people, so thank you for listening. My favorite comment was, "No offense, Pete."
Uh-oh.
It's the only episode I've listened to the end, all the way to the end. It was something somewhere.
The only episode they listened all the way through because they got bored of Pete and they were like, "Well, who is this guy, Pete?"
So you got to spice it up.
That makes sense.
It was a lot of fun to do, and I think people, and then of course, like about time.
A lot of those
I think that we get a lot of feedback from people in general on Instagram here or whatever about people liking seeing our dynamic of a relationship
and your dynamic, you and Pete.
Yeah, well,
people are like, oh, or a little
but
spicy.
not Mike and Pete.
No, they do not like that combo at all, which is probably part of the problem.
You know who would be great on this podcast is Johnny Kim, the astronaut Navy SEAL doctor, who
sounds made
you know what? I said he was 35. He's not. He's 36. And I also said that he walks down the street fist pumping. He doesn't. He walks down the street raising the roof. It's an old one, but still a good. Yeah.
Big flaw.
No, it's still play. It still works. And a doctor, a medical doctor.
We should reach out and see if he's available to come on the podcast.
To host instead of
if there's one thing I'm sure of, he's unavailable. Not available. He's extremely unavailable to do any kind of podcasting.
Well, you know who is available? Mom&Buried, and she may be back in the future. I don't know what we're talking about next week. Any ideas? Not to put you on the spot.
No.
What about an entire episode about 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon? Put your money where your mouth is.
What about an entire episode about Mike's soiled pants?
Don't exist.
Not only did I immediately start to vomit in my mouth, but also I got a little intrigued.
As did everyone at home.
Where's your vomit bowl? You need to have that thing handy.
It's very close. It's very close.
I'm sure it is. It's disgusting that you even have one of those and keep it in your house. I hate it.
Well, I do it because just to spite you, Mike. That's why. Are we? So that was good. I think we got everything. Any other? Did we miss anything?
I'm sure the followers will let us know. They'll probably tell Heather secretly that they blew it. You're better than them, according to the comments she's been getting.
All right. Well, perfect.
No, it was a lot of fun to do though. And
do you want to be back on episode 69 in 2 weeks?
I heard episode 69. That's very exciting.
You get it?
You get it? Yes, I get it. Jesus.
That was a good one.
Yeah, it's all like this basically.
Did you get it, Pete?
This is just all it is.
Only Pete got it.
No, I don't get it. Literally, I don't get it.
We are really good at ending these, as we discussed last week.
That's true, but we should, and for the sake of everybody, thank you very much for listening, and we will see you next week.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
I don't know why you would still be watching This Isn't a Marvel Movie, no matter how much I look like Paul Rudd, which you can deny it all you want. It's there in the eyes, I think. I'm young looking like him. If you enjoyed the podcast, which you obviously did or you wouldn't be listening still, sign up on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you want to listen to. Comment here on YouTube, subscribe, hit that like button. We want to hear from you. Comments, questions, dirty jokes, money, all the money you can give us. We'd love it all. Catch you next time.